Hello world, I'm Del Hussein and this is the Wow Mind. I am here with Earle Arney, visionary architect, who I think it's right to say that you are the last architect in London who has built a skyscraper. And the skyscraper is in the city of London and it's just behind us. It's like all of 100 meters away. And I worked out if your skyscraper was horizontal, it would take me about 20 seconds to run the length of it from the outside because it's 181 meters. And that's 200 meter speed. So, in a nutshell, how are you?
Really well.
What's new?
Well, who would have thought, not your speed of running, but who would have thought that a convict Australian recently arrived in London would have the privilege of getting to contribute to our great city skyline. And that was, I think, 2010 that started. So, and a lot has changed, hasn't it?
I mean, it's amazing because it is such an imposing building on the skyline. And it is true, Earle. I mean, the last person to build a skyscraper in London is an Aussie. That's kind of rich. It's brilliant. How did that come about? What happened?
Well, I'm sure it's got nothing to do with the fact that my first name is more like a title. And I can only begin to describe how tortured that was growing up in a colony like Perth, Western Australia. But I'll swiftly move on. Really well, I think, the interesting thing for me is that the drivers that went to create our role on 100 Bishopsgate are very, very similar to what they are now. And let me explain that. And Graham Morrison did an awesome job from Allies and Morrison of getting the consent in 2006, 2007 for 100 Bishopsgate. Our role was first to work independently of him and essentially what some people would reductively call optimise, but to essentially enable the building to be pre-let, working from as much as the outside in, the inside out. And of course, 2010 was just after the aftermath of 2008. We remember those times. Yeah. World's worst recession in 60 years with the headlines in the papers. That of course, pales into insignificance for 300 years, which I think we've got now. Yeah. But they're really similar drivers. But I think the really fascinating thing for me is that whilst there's similarities about the economic condition, there is a delightful and a welcomed a perspective and awareness of issues that were just peripheral in 2010. And what are they? Those issues are about essentially, if you categorise all of them, it's about people matter. They're about wellness. Yes, they're about sustainability and carbon, all of that sort of stuff. But moving well beyond issues that architects and developers get involved with in terms of ratings, but how can you really create a place that is right for people and also healthy? And I believe buildings, this next round of buildings, will be bastions of health. And what you have to go through to actually enter those buildings, which will become seamless and effortless, will mean that they're some of the healthiest environments that we get to inhabit, in addition to our own homes that we've got much control over. So it's a really exciting time. All those peripheral issues about wellness, carbon, sustainability are really now central. So it's a great time to be an architect.
Do you think that the idea now, because of this pandemic, right, which we can't get away from at the moment, but the people that are looking at buildings now have got a different view, whereas before they would say things like health and well-being, and I kind of started to feel it was like something to say. Yeah. Whether actually people meant it and they felt it, it was almost like...
Well, they felt obliged to...
They felt obliged, yeah. It's like a lot of people, I would say, up until about 2012, they would start saying sustainability, and I would talk to some of them, and actually they didn't really buy into it, but they felt they needed to. Yeah. And now you need to, because there's such a relationship between, it's almost like your spirit and the earth and how you feel and your health. And I think, a lot of people, while they've been at home, they've been doing gardening, they've been going for walks, they've been doing all this stuff, and kind of getting back in touch in a way that they would never have had that opportunity. So maybe it's given something back to people, which, I mean, it takes something like this to give people that little bit of earthiness back, you know. But you are actually quite like that. You're quite a spiritual person, which I
hope so.
I want to explore a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Because you're seen in a funny way. If this was Wolf of Wall Street, you would be the guy who runs a big corporation. You're a guy who's a successful entrepreneur, architect, runs big organizations, and you do the biggest things, the city towers, the skyscrapers, which there's only a handful of people that do. But actually you're very, if I can say, slightly hippie-ish in some of the things that you believe in.
Well, I'm definitely an oddball, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not just with, you know, the penalty of a title as a name and also my colonial heritage, being in the great city we are, but I think that you know, as we all let me first. I mean, there's a lot of rich stuff that you mentioned there. I think let me see if I can tackle it on a number of fronts. You rightly observe, to my mind, the authenticity that is now being shown to issues that were perhaps being ticked off as boxes. And I think there is a whole raising of our collective consciousness that is one of the positive aspects of what we've gone through. And it's not to diminish the huge loss and grief that many families have felt. But I've and honouring all of that. But thinking about the half full aspects of it, I mean, just what this has forced us to do is to become much more connected with our own spirit, with our families, the importance of all of that, and putting everything else in perspective. And Del, you and I have great responsibilities as employers, and you know, making sure, in your case, marshalling of talent, and in mine, also contributing to our clients, and in a larger sense, the civic contributions that any buildings we make, but also making sure they're uplifted and the rest of it. I think that there is absolutely this change in outlook. Some examples. After this, I'm lucky enough to be presenting a pre-app of a residential project that we're designing and have designed during COVID. And during COVID, our client has been really supportive, and more so than that, has actually been a co-collaborator in making sure that the apartments are right. So there isn't a space standard now for working at home, but there damn well should be. I mean, there's a lag, I get it, but he's ahead of the time and is allowing us to do that. And so how do you make sure that the spaces we create are really right for this really shifting dynamic place? And also part of that, I think, is also creating you know, great spaces and buildings that have you know, this loose fit for a long life. And it's a bit like our warehouse from not far from here in Shoreditch, that it was built in the 1870s. It was a hat factory. It has now been repurposed a whole bunch of times, including an architectural studio. So all of that stuff, I think, is important in terms of the care of the earth, you know, how we serve people. And I've always seen over the last 20, 25 years, showing my age, in my career, that what I do is part of my spiritual practice. And it's nice that you ask, because I don't think many people would see that necessarily in me, or would think along those lines, but it's certainly really important to me.
Well, I know, I mean, Earle, it's really interesting because you have a brother who is very spiritual. I think he
got a couple, actually.
Yeah, well, yeah, you do. But one of them, I think, lives in India or something.
Yeah.
And in a way, probably quite poles apart. But then I remember you were saying once, you guys were sat together and you were spending hours talking about almost like existence, really.
Yeah.
Where does that all take you?
Yeah,
how does that embroider itself in? Because you've got these influences of, you know, you've got the same mum and dad who have kind of brought you both up in the same way, the three of you up in the same way. You've all gone in such kind of weird ways. Just tell us maybe a little bit about that.
Well, I have three brothers, as you mentioned, and my eldest brother, I'm the youngest, I'm the baby of the family, and with all those privileges, but not quite the same as what the oldest was gifted with. But we're poles apart, as you say, because I'm a guy outwardly involved in running a business in a large city in the world, and his life choice is quite different, which is much more about minimalist approaches and simplifying his life, so he has a purity in his search for spiritual elevation and God realization. And I think within our family and our generation, with those two polar opposites, they're actually not, they're bookends of a very similar spiritual path, I guess, in my way of thinking. And it's really interesting that you can come from my parents were both spiritually aligned, and my mother was the first Anglican minister in Australia and campaigner for women's rights and all of that sort of stuff. And I have another brother who is also an Anglican minister, but of a difference too. And he saw an amazing need for the hunger of men who were incarcerated, and left the relative comfort of a parish to then become a prison chaplain, which he does, and he rides his motorbike with his dog collar and all of those things. So I think we might well be a family of oddballs, as you're suggesting, but who cares?
Do you know what? It's not even a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a family of character. But I think what's really evident is there's a passion in whatever is being done. Because I think your brother's certainly the one who, you've got the brother who's the minister, you've got the other brother who's, I think, gone down a different route. And his route is, I don't know, is he living in a cave or something, or something unusual? But
he's in an ashram. Yeah.
In an ashram, okay. So, but that's quite you've got to really believe in that. And you've got to really be passionate. And it's quite amazing and lovely that he's made that choice. And you see him, and I know when you were speaking about him earlier on, that you were saying it's just fascinating to listen the commitment he has to that world, and you can totally get it. And I think it's like with anything, when you get a passion for something, you can throw yourself in. And it's I'm thinking about a time when when you're at school and you've done something wrong, and they say, right, you're staying for detention, and the punishment is, and we had one which was, the punishment is to write an essay about life inside a ping pong ball, because they thought that would be the most torturous thing for most people. And I found it actually one of the most exciting things we've done, because you could almost escape inside this vacuum of anything, and I found myself scribbling away. But I think that's what passion is. You find yourself just doing things that really drive you, move you, make you feel enlightened. And you've done it through your architecture, and your enthusiasm lifts people. And that's why they say, we can see your vision, let's build a skyscraper. And not everyone gets to do that. In the same way that your brother's saying, right, I'm going to live in ashram, and this is what I want to do, because I can see life beyond the material kind of things.
I think it's really interesting juxtaposition, because I think that I should contextualise my eldest brother too, because he holds a master's from Australian National University, submitted a doctorate at Columbia University, but actually got to the point of saying, look, he could have this incredible academic life, which was about ancient Indian philosophy, and he speaks Sanskrit and reads Sanskrit rather, and speaks Hindi, all of these things. But for him, it was a conscious choice of saying, you know what, I'm going to unburden myself from all of these expectations, and I know where I'm happiest is serving this community in this ashram, and he's the only foreigner there. He does purposely very menial tasks, which are very rewarding for him. And I went and visited him once, and I mirrored him. I got to the end of 3 days, and I thought, oh my God, you're waking up at 4 a.m. and getting the temple ready and all those things that sound all quite banal. But within that repetition and that celebration of life comes a great, great awareness of the gift that we all have. And I think for me, I've had. It's wonderful, isn't it? Because we all get course corrected from time to time, and I've had quite a few of those in my life. Which at the time when you go through them, you're gripping the seat pretty hard, and the rest of it. But they are amazing, and I think for me they've helped me focus on not just what I really enjoy, but what I see as my purpose. And I think that I'm really privileged because I see that I've got a vocation which is an intersect of what my purpose is as well. And I think for me that's really, really rewarding, and it's deep down in your being that is
Talk
great.
to me about that purpose. What is it? What is this purpose? What is this burning cauldron?
Well, that's a really tough thing to summarise because it's multifarious. But I guess there's whole sorts of layers of that. We both have responsibilities for the people we employ, and it's like having gold poured in your pocket, watching people develop and take, in inverted commas, ownership of projects and bring things in a really unexpected way. And seeing people progress is one of the most rewarding aspects that I have for my job. I think in terms of the purpose, there is very much a sense I have of serving others. And this is perhaps, where the reconciling of competing demands is sometimes really interesting, because as architects, obviously, we're engaged by clients. So there's a direct service that we have to do for that. But it's also about everyone that you'll never meet who come to participate in the building, whether they enter it or not, or even if they see it from afar. And space has energy. And if you can imbue that space with a great vibration, and it just feels right, that's wonderful. And I should just highlight.
Fascinating. Space has energy, and to get the vibration right, can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I should hasten to say that I'm a naivety at all of this. I don't know what I'm doing, and it's very intuitive. But it starts with through history. There are many rule systems and spatial and proportional guides. From the Hellenic times, the Chinese had some very similar facets and thinking that are really interesting, because when you design things based off those precepts, they just either look right or they feel great, and they're good for the soul, and they uplift you when you're inside them. So it's that quality that we don't often talk about, and are often not expected to, or would be. You'd be deemed to, unfortunately, a bit of a nutcase in many commercial environments to mention all of this.
Yeah.
But they're really important, and many people would recognise how they're feeling as they have the delight of approaching and going through the double thresholds and in the amazing welcoming space, and how it just kind of works and all of that stuff. Others might not, and that's cool.
Well, they've actually got research now where they say, your psychology is impacted, and I think it's something like 10% of your psychology is impacted by the environment you're in. I think 40% is what you determine it to be. And 50% is your DNA from your mum and dad. So mum and dad, there you go, that's your bit. And then that 40%, what you choose it to be. And then the 10% is the external factors, right? So the 40% is mindset. How do you want to be? Is it raining outside, or are you going to sing in the rain? You know, how do you want it to be? And how do you want to transform the environment? And I think to an extent, when you say, you go into space and there's an energy, it's because it's the decision you've said, I'm going to make the energy, I'm going to see the energy, and it's a bit like me inside my white ping pong ball. You see something that isn't there, but it enlightens you, and you think, this is what I've got to do. I've got to do something. And it's almost like intangible, almost like metaphysical kind of reality.
Yeah, I get it.
But it's there.
Yeah.
It's just not in atoms and neutrons, and it's an invisible thing. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist in the same way that.
Well, I think there's several things in there. I'll tell you in a moment how I got to be one of the factors that have shaped me. But I think what you say is so interesting at this time, isn't it? Because we have a world of we're experiencing the world right now through flat screens, and it's really difficult to pick up energy of people through a flat screen. With home working, hybrid working, and all of these things. And my sincere hope through all of this is that, in addition to all the great aspects where we've had this condensed period of change, and we know that many knowledge workers can work from home, and we can have hybrid office models, all of that stuff, which is great for families. All in addition to that, I hope there will be an enduring sense of the importance of engaging with people in the same space. And we all know people have auras. We're aware that people have auras, and you feel it, you sense it. That's less easy to do through a flat screen, in my experience. But I'm at the beginning of my path, so I'm sure others can do that. But I think that the other aspect that you mentioned is the purpose of imbuing spaces with all of this. And I should just, as an aside, tell you this story, which is hopefully you'll find it, at least amusing and enlightening in a self-depreciating way. So my father, for all of my sins, was an architect as well. He recognised that I had an interest in architecture, and I had this symbiotic experience of architecture as a teenager, just with his architectural magazines hanging around. I thought that's pretty cool. Anyway, he was a partner of an architectural firm. It was a big wheel in our town of architecture of our city, and he recognised that a number of his business partners also had sons who'd come into the practice, and he didn't want the same thing to befall upon me, because in his opinion they weren't great and they were just cruising, and he wanted me to find my own path. So he steered me into engineering. I did a year of that, absolutely hated it, and then I said, in a nice way, screw you, I'm going to do architecture. And I became his worst nightmare. I thought, look at him, he's got a great car, all those things that's important in your late teens and early 20s. He's got a good house, got a pool, all of those trappings that I thought were really important. And so I'm just going to cruise. I just have his life. And then fast forward a year and a half into architecture, I found myself at the Architectural Association summer exhibition for a host of reasons. And I was staring at this triptych, amazing plan section elevation. These drawings were 3 metres long by about 700-800 mil high. They were incredible pastel drawings framed behind glass. They were amazing, absolutely amazing. And who knows how long I was standing there transfixed by the penmanship and the artistry and the design of a chap called Eldridge who did these. And my father, who was also there, quietly walked up behind me. I don't think I was aware of him until he was right behind me. And he said, "So, Earle, what do you think of that?" And I gushed. I said, "Oh, Dad, it's amazing." He said, "Yeah, it is. And it makes your work look really pedestrian."
No.
And I don't think he heard me as he walked off. He just shuffled off not waiting for a reply, and I just said, "Yeah, you're absolutely right." And it's interesting. I think he perfectly calibrated that for me, and he himself had a great intuition. And for me, it was a light bulb coming on, saying, whatever you do, you don't waste opportunities, and and what can you do to make the most of what you've got, and celebrating even the ordinariness of life, or even great artistry of that triptych. So for me, and what was that? That was in the late 80s. For me, that has been really helpful in my life, of just saying we're all so privileged to have the life we are. We're so privileged to have technology to be able to listen to this or engage with you, Del. So how do we acknowledge all of that sort of stuff and do the best we do, as and not put pressure on ourselves, but really have our eyes open as we track through this wonderful experience of life.
It's fascinating that your dad said you're being pedestrian. What does that do to you when you hear that? Does that make you think? Did you immediately think, okay, so you're saying I'm not being extreme enough, I'm being too safe, I'm being too, or are you thinking, yeah, screw you, Dad, I'm doing all right, forget it.
Why?
Can the ego take it? I mean, how does? Because there's always this kind of slight. I mean, they always talk about this father-son kind of like, come on, you don't know. There's a balance of push them along, toughen them up, and then trying to protect them as well.
Yeah.
So, but then it's just, how does the information occur to you?
Yeah, it's a really good point, isn't it? Because I think I mentioned earlier that I think he calibrated it well, because I heard it, and I in a nanosecond I responded.
You got it.
And whereas my son, who's 12, if I said that to him, well, I wouldn't, because he's much more sensitive than I was then in my early 20s. Case in point, though, I mean, he's just started high school. He's now in his second year. And as we all know, in London, it's a bit of a disaster. Moving from primary school to high school is greatly stressful. I think probably as much for parents as it is for kids in many instances. Certainly my case. And he has a certain efficiency about him. So his current belief is that if he can do things as faster than anyone else, that's the best outcome. So I pick him up from these exams and, how do you go? He said, oh, awesome, Dad, really well. I smashed it. I finished well before everyone else. I was like, maybe. Anyway, so predictably, he bombed out. He crashed out of all 6 of those exams that he did. And then I managed to somehow, through a bit of cajoling of headmasters, have the opportunity for him to sit, poor fellow, 2 more exams. And I sat him down beforehand and I said, and it was a very different conversation to the Architectural Association with my father. And I didn't quite understand how I was going to have this conversation. So it just happened. But I sat him down and I said something like, so Shay, you've got to understand that you're running out of runway, meaning that time's not there. And he kind of looked at me and said, what does that mean? Predictably, as a 12-year-old would. I said, well, have a think about it. You're the pilot of this plane. Where are you going to take it? You're hurtling down the runway. Are you really going to go for it? Put the thrusters on, pull up, and soar off into the horizon? Or are you going to put the brakes on and just stay grounded? What do you want to do? And that was kind of like the beginning and almost the end of the conversation. I thought, oh, well, I guess that didn't go that well. But then he went on to smash those things. And fast forward to when PhD fellow in India, and there's no less that their journees, and there's no less his contribution to where we are. So that that's one of the richness about where we are. Right, we're all so different.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. So when we look at the world ahead in light of what we've just had now, Earle, and we're talking about a vision for the future, a vision for cities even, the city right now is a bit of a ghost town. What can we take away that we can make something good from this? What could be the future? Because at this point, yeah, it's all navel gazing, but it's about what can we? Because it feels a bit like we're in one of those movies, where you look around the city, you wake up. I remember a Twilight Zone episode where you wake up one morning and there's no one there, and there's like just cars stopped and yellow cabs with doors open and things. There's an element of that here.
Yeah.
What can you do after that? How does one move forward? How will the city move forward? How will buildings change? Because people, the whole nature of people is we're social animals. We need to be together. We need to mix. We need to merge. People need to go to bars or libraries or study groups or, just meet people to do cake making or whatever. You need society. And even if you go back to us in tribes, we just hung around in tribal groups, right?
Yeah.
So sitting at home with your Netflix is really not a future for a longevity of people, of man. And you're certainly not going to pick up the social skills. So what happens now?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, walking here today, up Bishopsgate, it wouldn't have been that unexpected if Charlton Heston came riding around a corner on a horse like the beginning of the very first Planet of the Apes, and I'm certainly showing my age, and everything is deserted.
I think how do Ben Hare?
Yeah, similar. So, but there's, I'm really optimistic. I see these green shoots, and we're in the early doors of this, aren't we? We're like 7 months in the United Kingdom. We're 7 months into this, and it's easy to think how long this is, but it's been a relatively short period. I'm really hopeful for a number of reasons. I think that what we've been through, what we're going through, is precipitating amazing change, not just for conversations like these that probably wouldn't have happened quite so easily otherwise, but also right to our city fathers and planners. And I think that outside your office here, Devonshire Square, Bishopsgate, the centre of London, I would be really surprised that if in 10 years some of these major streets aren't pedestrianised, they're full of trees, the fresh air quality of our cities are amazing. And all of that is quite possible. And you can see it already happening on a granular level in terms of just the reprioritising of bikes over cars. And you look at the sales of electric vehicles that have just shot through the roof. So I think people will always have the desire to connect beyond virtual connection, and I don't see any decline of the city. I think we'll stay. Our city, in terms of office space use, will be about the same. I think that there'll be a much greater concern for the spaces between buildings, thankfully, than buildings just themselves. We're currently designing a 60-storey building in the heart of the city, and that is, in some regards, similar, but it's vastly different. Because it's all people-centric. It's all about how you get the best indoor environmental quality. How do you really uplift people's spirits? And how do you make sure that you make it really democratic so you can get everyone to the roof, but in a meaningful way that isn't some sort of nod to just ticking that box and making that happen. So I think that. We're on a path if we continue the conversations like you are so honourably doing, that will just help reinforce this momentum. And I think it's all up to us to make sure that we do have this inertia that continues to have the velocity and the weight behind it that enables there is real change. Not just for us, but certainly for our children and for the future generations. And that comes into all aspects of not just our city making, but making sure that we don't have water poverty. Every person on the earth has access to clean water, and there's some of there's some of the lower levels and the base of Matzo's pyramid. So we need to approach all of these things. Really, really important. But I see it all happening, and I hear it in the conversations that I have in the commercial sphere. It's really exciting.
It's brilliant. What's next, Earle? What are you up to? What are you up to in yourself?
Yeah.
What's getting you excited at the moment? What's making you think, do you know what? This is great. This is absolute. I mean, I know 60-story kind of skyscraper is pretty good, but in yourself, what's happening?
So, to be really honest, I think that the last 7 months has been really, really challenging. And there was and actually it's even before then in the UK. There was 4 years of challenges with the headwinds of Brexit, with our election, and in the part of the property sector that we look, it's kind of just everything stalled. And to be honest, I had a complete meltdown in February. I sat at home one Friday morning crying, not knowing how I could put one foot before the other. But that was fleeting, because we've all had challenges in life, and if you can remember, just how at the time they felt, absolutely apocalyptic. You can have faith in the human spirit. You can have faith that you're never given more than you can handle, and you can just have the confidence. Like, you know what? I'm just going to smash it, and come what may, I know I'm going to be all right. And come what may, I know I'm going to be able to provide for my family. So for me, the thing that really excites me is that it puts everything else in perspective after going through that. And of course, February was a month before the real stuff started to happen. So I was well prepared. But I felt, for me, to be really honest, that it's gone to deepen my resilience, and hopefully I've been able to convey and communicate that to my business partners and to the people that we employ. For the most part, we've, and I think to date, without exception, we've been able to avoid making anyone redundant during that period. So we're really, really lucky. So if in any small way I can help others who might be challenged for whatever reasons, that would be really wonderful. So that excites me, and that keeps me going.
Excellent. Well, I get that February feeling. I think probably a lot of people are going through that now.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. You found a way to work your way through it. And it is that thing again. You can. It's your runway analogy. You could kind of like just drive to a halt and say that's it. Or you could say, okay, no, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this opposite route.
And that Friday morning, it was every part of my senior that was saying, "Oh, just stay in your jammers, stay in bed." We've all got times, haven't we, where you've got to show up. And
that's that invisible thing, that invisible energy that says, come on, get up.
Yeah.
Get your ass out of bed.
And I think that, I think I've, in my own colloquial and colonial way, always said that, regardless of the challenges, I'm always gonna go fighting. I'm always gonna go down fighting if I have to go down. And then not that will ever happen, but that's kind of the mindset. I'll always do your best. And I think some of those conversations that I mentioned to you from the Architectural Association has helped. And I've been really fortunate to have the experiences I've had, and there are many more. And I think there's no bad experiences in life, right? They all shape us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, Earle, I know you are just about to disappear to go and do a presentation, so I'm not going to carry you anymore. But will you come back? Can we do another one of these?
I'd love to. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I really honour you doing this. I'm really looking forward to hearing many of your other great interviews.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And well, look, I'll see you straight after anyway.
Yeah, you bet.
You take care.
Thanks, Phil. That's great. Thank you. I really enjoyed that.